Every motorcycle sounds different. A Harley rumbles at a stoplight with that lazy, uneven thump. A Ducati clatters with mechanical urgency. A Yamaha R1 barks like nothing else on the road. And a Triumph triple howls like it's angry about something personal. That's not random, that's engineering. And the single biggest reason any motorcycle sounds, feels, and rides the way it does comes down to one thing: the engine layout. So today, we're breaking down every major motorcycle engine configuration, how they work, why they exist, what they feel like, and which bikes use them. By the end of this, you'll be able to hear a motorcycle go by and know exactly what's under the tank. Let's start with the simplest engine ever bolted to two wheels. Number 1, the single-cylinder thumper. One piston, one connecting rod, one massive pulse of torque every time the crankshaft completes 2 full rotations. That lone combustion event is why riders call these engines thumpers. You feel every single firing in your hands, your feet, and your spine. Singles typically range from tiny 125 cubic centimeters commuter bikes all the way up to 690 cubic centimeters monsters. The Honda Super Cub, a little 125 cubic centimeter single, has sold over 100 million units worldwide, making it the best-selling motor vehicle in history. Not motorcycle, motor vehicle, period. On the other end, the KTM 690 Duke squeezes 73 horsepower out of one cylinder. That is widely considered the most powerful production single ever made. The engine uses twin counter-rotating balance shafts to tame the vibrations, because without them, a big single will rattle your fillings loose at highway speed. And that is the fundamental trade-off with singles. They are the lightest, narrowest, cheapest engines to build. The KTM 690 Duke weighs just 331 pounds dry, perfect for off-road, perfect for city riding, and they produce strong low-end torque that makes them incredibly fun in the dirt. But that single piston slamming back and forth with nothing to cancel it out means serious vibration at sustained highway speeds. There is a practical ceiling around 700 cubic centimeters before the shaking becomes unbearable for daily road use. Suzuki tried pushing to 779 cubic centimeters with the DR800S, but it was discontinued partly because the vibration was just too much. Other iconic singles worth knowing: the Yamaha SR400, a 399 cubic centimeter kickstart-only thumper that stayed in production until 2021 with barely any changes. The Royal Enfield Classic 350, currently the best-selling motorcycle over 200 cubic centimeters on the planet, and the Honda CRF 450R, a 449 cubic centimeter motocross weapon making around 55 horsepower. In the dirt, nothing beats a single for its combination of lightweight and narrow profile. But what happens when you add a second cylinder right next to the first one? Number 2, the parallel twin. 2 cylinders side by side sharing one crankcase. This is the backbone of the modern middleweight market. But here is the thing nobody tells new riders. The number of cylinders is not what matters. It is how the crankshaft is configured. And that one detail completely transforms the engine's personality. A 360-degree crank means both pistons rise and fall together like synchronized swimmers. You get even firing intervals and a smooth rhythm, but you get the same vibration problems as a single because both forces add together instead of canceling. This was the universal choice for classic British motorcycles, the legendary Triumph Speed Twin from 1938 all the way through the golden age of BSA and Norton. A 180-degree crank puts the pistons opposite each other. When one goes up, the other comes down. That gives nearly perfect primary balance, but the uneven firing creates a rocking sensation. Honda and Kawasaki favored this layout for decades. The Kawasaki Ninja 650 uses it, making 67 horsepower at 8,000 revolutions per minute. But the real story is the 270-degree crank, and it has completely taken over the market. With crank pins 270 degrees apart, the firing intervals replicate what a 90-degree V-twin does. You get that throaty, syncopated pulse, that V-twin character, from a simpler, more compact package. The Yamaha MT-07 with its CP2 engine is the poster child. It displaces 689 cubic centimeters and makes 72 horsepower, and it sounds like a V-twin had a baby with a sport bike. The Aprilia RS 660 pushes this layout to 100 horsepower from 659 cubic centimeters, which is borderline absurd for a parallel twin. And the Honda Africa Twin uses a 1,084 cubic centimeter, 270-degree parallel twin specifically engineered to replicate the traction feel of the original bike's V-twin. So if a parallel twin can mimic a V-twin, why do V-twins still exist? Number 3. The V-twin. Because mimicking and being are two very different things. A V-twin places two cylinders on a shared crankshaft at an angle, and that angle defines absolutely everything about the engine's character. At 90 degrees, something magical happens. The primary forces from both pistons perfectly cancel each other with correct counterweighting. No balance shaft needed. This is the engineering ideal. The Suzuki SV650 uses this exact layout. 645 cubic centimeters, 75 horsepower, perfect primary balance, and it's been one of the most popular middleweights on Earth for over 2 decades. Now go narrow. Way narrow. Harley-Davidson's 45-degree V-twin is probably the most culturally significant motorcycle engine ever built. That tight angle with a single shared crankpin creates firing intervals of roughly 315 and 405 degrees, which produces the iconic potato-potato exhaust note you can hear from 3 blocks away. The Milwaukee 8 engine in current Harleys displaces up to 1977 cubic centimeters in CVO trim, making 115 horsepower and a massive 139 pound-feet of torque at just 3,000 revolutions per minute. That's arm-ripping torque at basically idle. Indian Motorcycle plays in the same space with their Thunderstroke 116, a 49-degree V-twin displacing 1890 cubic centimeters. It makes 92 horsepower and 126 pound-feet of torque at just 2,900 revolutions per minute. Both brands deliberately engineer in some vibration. They could smooth it out entirely, but riders of these bikes want to feel the engine working. The vibration is part of the experience. At the sport end, the KTM 1290 Super Duke R uses a 75-degree V-twin at 1,301 cubic centimeters for 180 horsepower at 9,500 revolutions per minute. That's a nearly 1-to-1 power-to-weight ratio. KTM nicknamed it the Beast, and honestly, that's not marketing. That's a warning. And then there's the wild card. Moto Guzzi mounts their V-twin longitudinally, with cylinders sticking out sideways into the airstream. Blip the throttle in neutral, and the whole motorcycle rocks sideways from torque reaction. Guzzi owners will tell you that's not a flaw, that's personality. But speaking of personality, nobody does it quite like the Italians in Bologna. Number 4. The Ducati L-twin. Technically, this is just a 90-degree V-twin mounted differently. When Ducati tilts the front cylinder nearly horizontal and the rear cylinder nearly vertical, the cylinders form an L shape instead of a V. There is no fundamental engineering difference. Ducati coined the term partly to distance their performance engines from the cruiser connotations of V-twin. But what makes Ducati's implementation genuinely unique is the desmodromic valve system. In a normal engine, springs close the valves. In a Ducati, mechanical cams actively close them too. Every valve has 2 cam profiles and 2 separate lash adjustments. Engineer Fabio Taglioni designed this system back in 1956 to solve valve float at high RPM, and Ducati has used it on nearly every engine since. The legendary Ducati 916, designed by Massimo Tamburini, is frequently cited as the most beautiful motorcycle ever created. It was even displayed in the Guggenheim Museum. The Panigale 1299 pushed the L-twin to over 205 horsepower before Ducati transitioned their superbike to a V4 in 2018. And that classic Ducati sound, it comes from 3 things. The 270-degree firing interval creates a syncopated exhaust note, the mechanical clatter of desmodromic valves, and on older models, the famous dry clutch rattle, metal on metal, no oil damping. It sounds like a bag of marbles in the best possible way. Number 5. The inline triple. 3 cylinders in a row, firing at perfectly even 240-degree intervals. Mathematically, this sits exactly between a twin's widely spaced pulses and an inline-4's rapid-fire delivery. Riders call it the Goldilocks engine, and once you ride one, you understand why. Triumph basically owns this layout. When John Bloor revived the Triumph brand in the early 1990s, the triple became their identity. The current speed triple 1200 RS makes 180.5 horsepower from 1,160 cubic centimeters, making it the most powerful Triumph ever produced. The Street Triple 765 shares engine DNA with Triumph's Moto2 race engines that power the entire championship series. Yamaha's CP3 engine in the MT-09 displaces 890 cubic centimeters and produces 117 horsepower. An MV Agusta's F3 800 pushes to 147 horsepower with a counter-rotating crankshaft borrowed from MotoGP technology, all from an engine weighing just 52 kilograms. That's exotic. The sound is unmistakable, a low burble at idle that transitions to an addictive high-pitched wail at full throttle. If you've never heard a Triumph Triple at Redline, do yourself a favor and look it up. But if you want maximum power per cubic centimeter, there's really only one answer. Number 6. The Inline 4. This is the engine that conquered sport bikes, and it happened because of one motorcycle. The 1969 Honda CB750, a 736cc inline 4 with 67 horsepower, an electric starter, and a front disc brake, priced at just $1,495. It created the word superbike. It effectively ended the British motorcycle industry overnight. Over 400,000 were produced. Kawasaki fired back with the Z1 in 1972, an air-cooled 903cc four-cylinder monster making 82 horsepower. 130 miles per hour, the fastest production motorcycle of that year. Its internal development code name was New York Steak. Not kidding. Modern inline 4s have reached insane levels. The Honda CBR 1000RR Fireblade SP produces 217.5 horsepower from 999.9 cc with technology derived directly from their MotoGP race bike. The Kawasaki Ninja ZX-10R makes 200 horsepower at 13,000 RPM and has won 7 World Superbike Championships since 2013. The classic inline 4 character is smooth, linear power that builds and builds until it absolutely screams at the top of the rev range. 4 small pistons with short strokes means these engines love high RPM. The Yamaha R6 once exceeded 16,000 RPM on the tachometer. The 600cc Supersport class pushed the inline 4 to its absolute limits, but emissions regulations have basically killed that category. Only the Kawasaki ZX6R at 636cc survives as a street-legal supersport. In 2009, Yamaha flipped the script entirely with the R1's cross-plane crankshaft, using crank throws at different angles to create uneven firing intervals that sound more like a V-twin than a traditional inline 4. It changed how the tire hooks up to the pavement and gave the rider a more direct connection between throttle input and rear-wheel torque. It remains one of the most distinctive engine notes in motorcycling. Suzuki actually studied the cross-plane approach and concluded it sacrifices some low RPM power for better traction feel. Both philosophies have their fans, and the argument will probably never be settled. If you are finding this breakdown useful, consider subscribing. We go deep on motorcycle content every week. Now, what if you took the best qualities of a V-twin and an inline 4 and smashed them together? Number 7. The V4. 4 cylinders arranged in 2 V-shaped banks. This is MotoGP technology, and it has trickled down to the most exclusive production motorcycles on Earth. The Ducati Panigale 5.4 is the clearest example. Its 1,103 cubic centimeters Desmosedici Stradale engine shares an 81mm bore with Ducati's actual MotoGP race engine. It produces 216 horsepower at 13,500 RPM. A counter-rotating crankshaft reduces gyroscopic effects for faster direction changes, and the twin pulse-firing order groups cylinders into closely spaced pairs that mimic a twin's traction advantages while delivering 4-cylinder power. The track-focused V4R variant makes 233 horsepower with the race kit. Aprilia takes a different approach with their RSV4, using a narrow 65 degrees V angle that makes the engine incredibly compact front to back. It produces 217 to 220 horsepower and remains the only production superbike where you can adjust the engine position, headstock angle, swing arm pivot, and ride height. It is basically a race bike somebody accidentally put mirrors on. Honda's V4 heritage goes deepest of all. The legendary RC30 from 1987, the RC45, the VFR 800, and the extraordinary RC213 VS. A street-legal MotoGP replica sharing 80% of its parts with the race bike priced at $184,000. Only about 400 were hand-built. And finally, let us talk about the weirdest and most wonderful engines that do not fit the conventional mold. Number 8. The Boxer Twin, the Flat Six, and the Exotics. BMW has built horizontally opposed flat twin engines called Boxers since the R32 in 1923. That's over 100 years of continuous production. The pistons punch outward in opposite directions like a boxer's fists, placing the engine's heaviest components at or below the motorcycle's centerline for the lowest center of gravity of any layout. Both cylinders stick out into the airstream, which is great for cooling but limits lean angle and makes them vulnerable in a crash. BMW riders universally consider this a feature, not a bug. The BMW R1250 GS makes 136 horsepower from 1,254 cubic centimeters using shift cam variable valve timing, a clever system with 2 cam profiles per intake valve that switches between economy and performance modes while the engine is running. A solenoid-actuated pin engages spiral grooves on a sliding camshaft to swap between a mild lobe for cruising and a wild lobe for peak power. Shift cam added 11 horsepower over the previous R1200 GS while actually improving fuel economy. The R1250 GS is the best-selling large adventure motorcycle on the planet, and the Boxer layout means it mates naturally to shaft drive since the longitudinal crankshaft already points toward the rear wheel. The massive BMW R18 takes the Boxer to its absolute extreme. It has a 1,802 cubic centimeter air and oil-cooled engine, the biggest BMW has ever built, with visible push rods and a deliberately retro design. It makes just 91 horsepower, but an enormous 120 pound-feet of torque at 3,000 RPM. More than 110 pound-feet is available across the entire 2,000 to 4,000 RPM range. You do not rev this engine, you just roll the throttle and hold on. Then there is Honda's Goldwing GL 1800. It has a 1,833 cubic centimeter flat six, producing 125 horsepower and 125 pound-feet of torque. It is the only flat six motorcycle in production, and nothing else comes close to the absolute smoothness of 6 cylinders with perfectly even firing intervals. The whole package weighs 833 pounds, and Honda hides the fuel tank under the seat to keep the center of gravity as low as possible. And the true exotics? The Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 from 1972, a 750 cubic centimeter 2-stroke triple, so fast and so dangerous, it earned the nickname Widowmaker. It ran the quarter mile in 12 seconds flat. The Aerial Square 4, essentially 2 parallel twins geared together, had only 15,641 ever built. The Suzuki RE5, a rotary-powered Wankel engine motorcycle, was one of the smoothest bikes ever produced, but averaged 25 miles per gallon and nearly bankrupted Suzuki. And here's what ties all of this together. There is no objectively best motorcycle engine layout. Singles dominate off-road because nothing matches their light, narrow simplicity. V-twins own the cruiser world because their torque and sound define that culture. Inline fours dominate superbikes because peak power wins races. And the 270-degree parallel twin has become the modern default because it delivers the best balance of cost, character, and capability for the widest range of riders. The engine layout does not just move the motorcycle, it moves the rider. And that is why people will argue about this stuff forever. If this breakdown helped you understand what is going on under the tank, hit subscribe and check out our video on the greatest motorcycle engines ever built. I will see you in the next one.